What's up, and welcome to another edition of the Cover 2 Recap. I'm BruinSportsport.com publisher Edward Lewis. As always, this is Ryan Karchi, the UCLA beat writer for the OC Register. We're here tonight at the Rose Bowl, where UCLA fell to Utah 30-28. Kind of a stunner. Nobody really expected it. Utah is coming off a loss to Washington State, one of the worst teams in the Pac-12. UCLA is coming off of a 60-point win over Arizona State last week, one of the better teams in the Pac-12. And all of a sudden, this kind of outcome happens. First of all, I want to know who gets the blame.
Well, there's a lot of people who are definitely responsible after this game, but I think you first and foremost have to start, up front at the offensive line. 10 sacks allowed today. You're talking about a team, Utah, that we knew was one of the best pass rushing teams in the country, averaged 4.5 sacks per game, which was the nation's best rate. They had 5 sacks at halftime, so they had already surpassed that. One drive towards the end, right when UCLA was kind of in the thick of it. I know Brett Hundley went on and had 2 touchdowns after this, but Brett Hundley got sacked on 3 straight plays and almost had a safety on the very last sack. It was almost demoralizing to the point that they felt like they couldn't even pass anymore. I mean, they ran the ball 50 times. So, you had everyone after the game. I know Brett Hundley is trying to put some of that on him. He says he could have made some pre-snap audibles. Said he didn't have to hold on to the ball as long. Sure, I agree. Jim Morris said it was on everyone, on all 11 players. Obviously, a little bit of coach speak there, but I thought it was telling that Jake Brendel came out and said, no matter what they say, no matter whose fault it was, ultimately those numbers come down and reflect on the offensive line. And I think today you just have to question if this offensive line is ever going to be good enough for this offense to live up to its expectations.
I was trying to figure out who I would put the blame on before we started filming this, and you could literally put the blame on everybody. I mean, even the offensive line gives it 10 sacks, but I'm going to go home and watch a replay of the game, and I bet you we'll credit Brett Hundley with 6 or 7 of them. Just him, locking on receivers or not finding guys open or getting rid of the ball or running into a sack. Defensively, how do you, before the game-winning field goal drive, Utah does not throw a pass, yet runs 7 or 8 times all the way down your throat, all the way into 22-yard field goal range. This is supposed to be a Jeff Ulbrich hit you in the mouth defense. Not only that, then Brett Hundley comes down and gets your offense into scoring position, and you have 2 cracks at a 55-yarder and a 50-yarder, and you miss both field goals. So there's just blame for everybody. You can't really pick a standout from this group. I was trying to give out game balls, in my little notebook after the game, and you have a hard time picking even one UCLA player where you're like, okay, this guy had a phenomenal game.
And I don't even know what Jeff Ulbrich does with the defense going forward. I mean, he dialed up a few more blitzes. I mean, we saw that mix up some things with Jaleel Wadood got a sack on one play. I know Marcus Rios was in the backfield on one corner blitz. But at the same time, Jeff Ulbrich after the game basically saying, again, we have the players, they just have to do it. And if that's the only thing you can say at this point, I'm not sure where you go. I'm not sure what kind of improvements you make because, on one hand, they weren't necessarily prepared for Kendall Thompson to take the brunt of the plays like he did. Being a dual threat kind of added an extra dimension to Utah's offense. But eventually you got to make adjustments to that. I mean, they just gashed them all game. I know, like you said, on that last drive, there was no stopping them. They ran 9 straight run plays easily and kicked a game-winning field goal. I mean, it doesn't get easier than that.
Now let's get into the magnitude of this loss. Everybody in college football lost today, and everybody's going to lose. I mean, it's pretty clear that there's no one dominant Alabama-type team this year. But that being said, this is Utah, unranked, at home, 13-point favorites. Tell me what this loss does for UCLA's season.
Well, at first glance, you have to think it's going to be pretty much impossible, at least very difficult for UCLA to have a case to get into the college football playoff. I know it definitely doesn't look for the Pac-12 good for the Pac-12 as a whole. You have Oregon and UCLA, arguably the 2 best and most likely teams to compete for that, out in the same week. Stanford too at the same time. So you can look at it in one way and think everyone lost. Like you said, they lost, so it's not nearly as big of a deal. But at this point, if you're UCLA, especially when you have such a murderer's row of a schedule coming up, I mean, you still have to play Oregon. You still have to play Arizona, who is now the only undefeated team remaining in this ridiculous Pac-12. You still have to play Cal, who is somehow
good.
Somehow good. I mean, at this point, and I was reminded several times when I tweeted about this after the game, UCLA hasn't won in Berkeley in a long time, and this is clearly not the team that barely looked like an FBS qualifying team last year in Cal. So at this point, I think you have to throw out pretty much any conception you had of the Pac-12, of UCLA, and how things are going to go forward, because I think it's pretty clear that this team doesn't quite have its identity yet. And until you get that, especially with a game against Oregon looming next week, who, albeit hasn't looked that great, but is still has the firepower to easily run over a team playing like UCLA did today, I'm just not so sure what to expect going forward.
It's going to be extremely tough. The Pac-12 is definitely tough this year. That'll wrap up our coverage from UCLA's loss tonight. As always, you can follow Ryan's coverage of UCLA on Twitter at Ryan_Karchi. You can follow me on Twitter at EdwardLewisBSR. Until the next time, thanks for tuning in to the Cover 2 Recap.